director of the Tax Revenue Administration of Angola 15 days ago,
Right.
Alice. Yes, and now we're receiving you. So it's really a pleasure. And we think that to reach out globally to the community and have people that have different perspectives from ours is really interesting. So it's really a pleasure to receive you here.
It's a pleasure to be here too. Thank you very much.
And actually, I've been only once to the African, I cannot even say continent, because I went to Cabo Verde once, to Cape Verde once.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it's super weird. I wanted
That's the
to
only
go,
time.
yeah, I wanted to go to South Africa and do the tourists that everyone does it, go to the safaris and all of that. So, and explore a bit on the continent. However, I had a lecture in Cape Verde, so I ended up there because there they speak Portuguese. I ended up going to Cape Verde because they asked me to go to do a conference over there for the government.
Oh, okay. So you didn't have the time to do all those visits.
Yeah.
Okay.
And may I ask something? What is that symbol on your left shoulder?
This one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's a painting. I'll bring it close. Can you see?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a painting depicting an African community.
Oh, that's interesting.
So this round circle-like thing that you're seeing is just a group of people in a community sitting around the king. That's it.
Oh, that's interesting. No, because I only saw from the distance, I only saw that the people and someone in the middle.
Yes. And their houses behind it.
Yes. Oh, that's very nice.
So it's just showing you what a typical African society looks like.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, we are ready.
Yes.
Ah, okay.
And just another question. So just to know before we start formally, law school, how many years do you have law school in Nigeria? Just
okay, it's 5 years at the university.
Oh, okay.
And then the 6th year is for law school. We call it law school. It's like law clinics where, where they learn the, typical advocacy.
Oh,
so,
I understand.
Yeah, so anybody who goes to law school is fit to practice in courts. But if you stop at the 5 years in the university, then you cannot practice in courts.
Oh, that's interesting. And I was wondering if you have the splitting system such as in America or here, because here in Brazil, it's 5 years and it's only that. So then you do the bar exam. And if you pass, you can practice law. If you don't, you can teach or whatever.
Oh, okay. So the bar exam is after the 5th year?
Yes.
Yes.
Maybe you can take it before, but you are only allowed to. You can take a practice test, and then you can practice law after you graduate.
Yeah.
If you pass the bar exam.
The bar exam is after the 6th year. That's 1 extra year. Yeah.
Interesting.
No, yeah.
Sorry.
No, and I was wondering because, I was wondering just because, for example, I didn't know if the system was more closely connected with our system and the European system, in which law is still only a single faculty, because in the United States, for example, you have the undergraduate, and then the graduate is when you do the JD, for example.
No, it's much closer to the European system.
Okay, so that was my question. Yes. Very interesting and informative to know.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure stay with us in this afternoon. Welcome to University of Marília, Ngozi. And now I will speak Portuguese because my English is so poor. So nice to meet you. Também gostaria de cumprimentar a minha querida amiga, que me dá o prazer e a honra de participar desses encontros internacionais, professora Mariana. Muito obrigada por oportunizar momentos como este na Universidade de Marília. Quero cumprimentar o nosso coordenador do curso do programa de pós-graduação, mestrado e doutorado da Universidade de Marília, que de fato tem transformado a vida de todos nós num processo de diferentes formas de aprender e ensinar. Professor Jonathan, uma honra trabalhar contigo. Professor Jonathan, conta um pouco dessa trajetória do programa de pós-graduação da Universidade de Marília em tempos de pandemia. Queria cumprimentar também os nossos componentes desse brilhante debate, que eu tenho certeza que será da tarde de hoje. Professora doutora Adriana, professor doutor Heron, professor doutor Rogério, nosso professor da casa, professora doutora Sinara, também da casa. Uma honra estar com vocês, de fato, dividindo esses momentos tão especiais que o projeto da professora Mariana, Diálogos sobre Desenvolvimento, Empresa e Sociedade, vinculados ao PPGD da Universidade de Marília, tem transformado as nossas quartas-feiras. Até brincava na última quarta-feira que eu achei que nós estávamos encerrando um ciclo, e a professora Mariana já me adiantou que realmente não encerraríamos esse ciclo. E tem muita coisa boa para a gente fazer, tenho certeza que então nós vamos continuar aí na internacionalização da Universidade de Marília, que realmente nos orgulha demais. Hoje, nós estamos vivendo um momento atípico, né, na educação. Estamos mantendo as atividades teóricas de forma online. Para nós, do presencial, realmente tem transformado as nossas vidas enquanto professores, enquanto educadores, mas a gente tem acompanhado uma grande evolução também, principalmente na produção do conhecimento. A Universidade de Marília tem muitos cursos da área da saúde, nós temos aqui o hospital referência no enfrentamento à Covid-19, então nós oportunizamos também muitas coisas práticas nesse momento de pandemia aos nossos estudantes. Fico muito feliz, muito mesmo, de poder compor, nesse for um curto espaço de tempo, mas compor esse projeto da professora Mariana. Queria realmente agradecer o carinho e colocar a Universidade de Marília à disposição. Dr. Ngozi, welcome, and Marília is a wonderful city. Nice to meet you. Mariana?
Mariana?
Professor Jonathan, por favor, poderia dizer algumas palavras para os nossos alunos?
Hello, everyone. As everyone knows, my name is Jonathan Barros Vita. I'm the director of the Master's and PhD program of the University of Marília. And as always, I'm here opening alongside Fernanda, who is my boss. I'm opening the events of Mariana and welcoming everyone to our channel. Everyone, don't forget to click subscribe on the channel, like the video, and follow us on our Instagram and Facebook. This is very important. And it's very important because even on our vacations, we're opening the university to our society. We are doing internationalization. We are doing everything that we can to comfort everyone and give what the university can give, which is education and knowledge to everyone. And on the pandemic times, this is what we are doing. And we are not stopping here. We are doing this week still. We have tomorrow an event of Professor Ives Gander Martins, which is a dear friend, hosted by Professor Emerson and with many people. And on Friday and tomorrow at 5 p.m. Brazilian time. And on Friday, we have at 7 p.m., we have another round of the Brazilian tax reform. And I'm hosting again Fernanda Pacobaíba and also Fabiana Del Padre Tomé. We will surely have great debates. But I cannot forget to say that I am really, really glad to receive all the guests here. We have Professor Rogério Mulica, which is from our program. We have our dear friend Heron from Federal University of Bahia. We have Adriana, and obviously we have Professor Ngozi, who is a scholar and a well-renowned scholar in Nigeria, and surely will give us a really interesting lecture today. And it's really, really good to have another continent here on this project. But as I said, we are trying to broaden our scope and bring everyone from different continents here. And you are surely welcome here virtually at Unimar, University of Marília, but later for sure, physically at Marília. And so you are going to have to take a flight to São Paulo. Then from São Paulo, you're going to Marília, which is 450 kilometers. And everyone can never forget that we are still having our selection process for the PhD and the master. So everything you can find online. Thank you very much.
Obrigada, Jonathan. Professor Jonathan sempre passando aí informações essenciais que a professora Mariana, que não é muito boa de protocolo, sempre esquece de passar. Eu agradeço as palavras do Jonathan, as palavras da nossa pró-reitora, Fernanda Serva, sempre tão gentil. É uma honra estar ao lado de vocês às quartas-feiras nesse projeto. Eu agradeço a oportunidade de ser professora dessa universidade. Eu tenho muito orgulho de trabalhar na Unimar, por tudo que a Unimar faz pela comunidade local, pela comunidade do Brasil. Eu agradeço a oportunidade de poder viabilizar esse projeto, que foi idealizado pelo professor Jonathan. Não só eu, mas, como ele bem falou, outros professores da casa também estão engajados nisso. E essa foi a razão também de decidir continuar nas férias, porque o nosso projeto se tornou uma coisa maior do que a nossa sala de aula, se tornou importante para a comunidade acadêmica do direito, para a sociedade como um todo. Então, quando a gente pensa assim, mas são as nossas férias, sim, mas isso ficou muito maior do que a nossa sala de aula. Então, é por isso que nós vamos seguir, enquanto tiver a pandemia, né, para poder oferecer isso à sociedade como um todo. Então, eu parabenizo o professor Jonathan, Fernanda, por propiciarem isso à sociedade brasileira. Professor Jonathan e professora Fernanda, eu acho, inclusive, que isso é projeto de prêmio, hein? A gente tem que inscrever aí esse projeto, que não é possível que isso não vá ser premiado, pelo menos no nosso país. Eu vou pedir licença para começar a falar inglês, porque a nossa convidada fala inglês, e eu quero que ela se sinta em casa. Mas, se eu perceber pânico, aqui no YouTube, a gente volta para o português. Tá bom? Hello, everyone. For those who don't know me yet, my name is Mariana Santiago. I am professor of the postgraduate program at the University of Marília. And I hope you all are well and safe in these difficult times that we are living in this pandemic. We will start now a weekly event called Dialogues on Development, Company and Society. It's an event organized by the University of Marília, but it's now completely open to all the law community. I see that we have with us today students and professors from different places in Brazil. So welcome everybody. And it's a pleasure today to have with us Professor Dr. Ngozi Unuigbe from University of Benin, Nigeria. And her lecture will be about ecocide and rights of nature. The subject is extremely current and it's in line with what we work at the University of Marília in my classes. Me and Professor Ngozi are also part of the United Nations project called Harmony with Nature, and they already know what it is, but it's a very interesting program. For those who don't know it yet, I recommend that see our website on the internet with all the information. And I have to mention the presence of other professors with us today to a dialogue. Professor Dr. Eron Gordilho from Federal University of Bahia. He is the most important reference in rights of animals in Brazil. And also Professor Dr. Adriana Campos. She is the coordinator of the law postgraduate program of the Federal University of Espírito Santo. And she is also a professor of history. Thank you, Adriana. And we have with us also my dear colleague at the University of Marília, Rogério Mulica. They will discuss the topic with us. Thank you, professors, for being here with us today. And I have to say thank you to Professor Maria Helena Diniz and her International Law Institute for all the support to this event. And finally, I wish everyone a great experience. Professor Ngozi, feel free to start your lecture. We look forward to hearing you. Thank you once again.
Okay, hello everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and I think I'm more delighted than you are actually to participate in this program. I'm going to speak as slowly as possible. I wish I could communicate in Portuguese, but what I have tried to do is to title some of the slides in Portuguese to the best of my ability. So pardon me if some of the words are not very accurate, but I imagine that they convey a message. So I'm not going to take much of your time. I hope the message is as clear as possible. I'm going to start with discussing what is nature. Many times it's easy for us to say nature this, nature that, nature is this, nature is that, but what exactly is nature? Nature will mean different things to different people, but let's look at this very general definition. It says the phenomena of the physical world collectively, including plants, animals, the landscape, and other features and products of the earth as opposed to humans or human creations. Generally, this is a correct definition. Now, what is wrong with this definition is the fact that it excludes humans. Humans are actually part of nature itself, which we see very soon in the lecture. But this is generally what nature is. Nature is everything apart from the activities of man and what man has created. Now, why is it important to protect nature? Why do we need to protect nature? Different people have answers, different answers to this particular question. Now, these different topics, animal liberationism, biocentrism, ecocentrism, strict anthropocentrism, weak anthropocentrism. All these people are saying different things because they see nature as different things. Now, the animal liberationists say that we should be very concerned, or even more concerned, about protecting the animals because they are the ones that really matter. The biocentrists extend their protection to every kind of life form. Anything that has life in it should be protected. The ecocentrists would say that anything that is nature at all, whether it is a rock, whether it is a river, whatever it is, as long as it is named nature, it should be protected. Now, the strict anthropocentrists will say no, it is only man that should be protected as long as it deals with the interest of man to the exclusion of every other thing you can protect. The weak anthropocentrists protects man as well, but the difference between them and the strict ones is that they protect man in this generation and future generations. So what that does is that you do not have any choice but to protect nature, because we are not the only ones in this life who are to enjoy nature, but also our children. Now, we'll have a better explanation of that very soon. Now, if you look at these two theories, you have ecocentrism, you have anthropocentrism. The question is, which one is better? Which one is going to protect nature more? Again, people have different answers to this particular question. It's very simple. The more we look at nature as separate from man, the more difficult it is to protect nature. But when we begin to look at nature as a web, a combination of man, animals, water, land, whatever it is, as a community, then it becomes easier to protect nature. So what that means is, I am in nature, nature is in me. So once I destroy nature, I destroy myself. Very simple logic. That's what this particular slide is talking about. So rather than say man is separate from nature, it is more important, or it is more helpful to look at man as a part of nature, as a member of the community of nature. I'll just quickly move to the next slide. Now, this is just a representation of what I have just said. Man is in nature, nature is in man. You cannot separate both of them from each other. It is not possible. This is a better representation of the points that I'm trying to make. Once you cut off man from any of these links, or once you cut off nature from any of these links, it might not be an immediate death to man, but harm, danger, or death is sure to happen. We are seeing that in different ways. We're seeing that in climate change. We're seeing that in even the COVID-19 pandemic. We're going to see that again shortly. So this diagram right here is showing the community effect of man and nature. It is not man on one side, it's not human beings on one side and nature on one side. It is human beings in nature and nature in human beings. So a destruction to nature is a destruction to human beings. Now, it will be very interesting for you to know that because of our idea of wanting to protect man, or putting man's interest first, or making it look like man is separate from nature, most of our laws all over the world, most of our environmental protection laws center around man, center around meeting his interests, center around man's consumption, center around production. They don't look too much about preserving the environment. Now, you might ask me, we have environmental protection laws all over the place, all over the world, including Brazil. But how come these laws do not preserve nature? If you look at these laws properly, you will find out that these laws only protects the environment for man in this generation. So what you see in the provision of the laws is that they are reactive. You respond to them. They are not laws that are preservationists. In other words, they are not laws that take precautions to prevent any harm to nature. That is why we have these pie charts. The brown section of the pie chart shows that majority of the laws in the world do not preserve nature. That small gray patch which you see there, this small gray patch here, shows the very small percentage of the countries that have nature preservation laws. And of course, we have a ready example in Ecuador in the Article 72 and 73 of the 2008 Constitution of Ecuador. We have several other laws coming up like that. Recently in 2019, we had a law like that in Uganda. Now, that might not be in the Constitution, but is actually a very clear law that protects the rights of nature in Uganda. A few of them are coming up like that because people are beginning to realize the importance of looking at the relationship between man and nature. So now that we're talking nature, 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 are we, okay, well, this is the situation we have now. The situation we have now is that there's so much development, and the development is neglecting the protection of nature or the preservation of nature. So there's the nature is being killed, is being damaged. Development is going on at the expense of nature. This is the situation as it stands. This is not acceptable. On the other side, are we saying that we're asking for nature's preservation, we're asking for nature's protection, therefore this is what we want? No, we do not want this either. What then is the ideal situation? What then is the balance for the protection of the rights of nature or for the preservation of nature? Yes, this is what we want. Well, it's easier said than done. But is it possible? Yes, very, very possible. That is why we have law as an instrument of social change. I mean, law will bring about change, but law will bring about change with a combination of other factors. But the law has to be in place. The right law has to be in place for other things to help it work. This is the situation we're looking for. We are not saying don't go about developing. We are not saying protect only nature. What we are saying is that while you are developing, have it in mind that nature has to be preserved. So how do we do this? How do we go about this? This is what I have proposed. And this is what many other people have proposed in different other ways. A compromise. How do we get this compromise? How do we get a compromise that gives us the kind of balance that we are looking for? Should we develop? Yes. Should we protect nature? Yes. How do we do that? So we're talking about nature's rights on one side and property rights on another side. Now, this compromise is simply saying this. This is an example of the compromise clause. And I really, really do hope that the Portuguese aspect of it is understandable, because it is very, very crucial. What it is saying is that the exercise of property rights must be within the context of careful consideration and knowledge of the needs of nature and the unique function it plays in the ecosystem. Thus, or therefore, nature can be exploited to the extent that these vital functions are maintained. This is very, very critical. The clause is very simple, it's very straightforward. It says, go ahead and do what you want to do, but if it is going to affect the vital functions of nature, then do not do it. Let's take an example from the Amazon River. Hopefully, this is a good picture of the River Amazon. Now, you have this picture and you have a situation where people are fighting for the rights of this precious river. That is right of nature. And you ask a question, what about property rights? What about the other people? What about the farmer? What about the irrigator? What about people who want to build houses and dams and all of those things to exercise their property rights, which there's nothing wrong with? How do you balance both of them? Now, if we go back to the compromise clause, which I just showed, it becomes very easy. Where there's a dispute between River Amazon and the property rights of the farmers, for example, what the dispute resolution body, the courts or just a regular dispute resolution body should be looking at is, what is the function of River Amazon to the ecosystem? If these farmers or these irrigators enforce their property rights, is it going to affect that function that River Amazon has in the ecosystem? If it is going to affect the function in a way that it cannot be reversed, then it will not be allowed. But if using that property right will not affect the function of River Amazon, will not affect the maintenance of its running itself, then the property rights can be enforced. It is actually that simple. It is that straightforward. So the compromise clause simply says that anybody who is enforcing his property rights should have nature at the back of his mind, should put nature into consideration. If it is going to damage nature in a way that cannot be reversed, then it should not be implemented. It should not be allowed. This is where we come to Ecocide. It's a very simple logic. And the logic is, we have said, nature is a biological community of interacting organisms. The interacting organisms include man, human beings, us, me, you, everybody. We are part of this biological community. Secondly, destruction of this biological community is destruction of the interacting organisms. In other words, destruction of this biological community is destruction of human beings, ourselves. Therefore, destruction to nature must be prevented or even punished as ecocide, because homicide, suicide, genocide, these are all crimes of destruction. Ecocide is a destructive act, so it should classify as a crime because it's a destruction to our community, is a destruction to our home, is an actual destruction to our existence. Everybody knows the Amazon forest. Everybody knows the Amazon rainforest. Now, one thing about rainforests is that they contain a large number of biodiversity. The Amazon forest, rainforest, for example, Brazil contains 2/3, 60% of the Amazon forest. In this Amazon forest, 1 out of every species in the world lives in this forest. What does that mean? That means that the Amazon forest has the largest collection of biodiversity in the world. Now, you have this at the back of your mind, and suddenly you begin to see a destruction to the Amazon forest. The kind of destruction that you cannot reverse. Now, that is a crime. That is destruction. That is ecocide. You might not see the effect today, but the effect will surely be seen. Now, this is talking about how much of the rainforest has been destroyed and all of that, but this is a better representation of the kind of destruction that has taken place in the Amazon forest. Much of the destruction, I stand to be corrected, of course, but much of the destruction is by cattle ranching, and then you have 10% by commercial agriculture, you have logging, you have small scale agriculture, you have other things. Now, anybody looking at this will say, so what? I mean, I still cannot relate to how nature is affected. You still cannot relate. This next slide. This is a GIS, a spatial representation of how much of the Amazon forest has been destroyed. So now you see that the portion of the Amazon forest on the left is much smaller than that on the right. It is increasing at a very, very fast rate. The problem with us human beings is that because things happen gradually, a little today, a little next year, a little the other year, we do not seem to know the effects until we see things like this. Now, this is an over 100, the increase is over 129 in an increasing rate every year, and this has been for decades. Where do we go from here? I mean, we still live in our houses. We still breathe fresh air. we still drink clean water, hopefully. So it's not so bad, right? No, it is actually very, very bad. This is an example of what mining has done to that same Amazon forest. Now, you know what this kind of thing can do? It is irreversible damage. Yes, you can do deforestation and all of that, but with this topsoil of the earth removed, it is going to be very, very difficult. And with this kind of mining activities, groundwater has been polluted. And the pollution of groundwater stays on for years and comes into effect 15 years, 20 years, and so on and so forth. This is real danger. This is a typical example of ecocide. It should not be allowed. It should be punished like an international crime, actually. Now, the details of how this crime will be implemented is not part of this lecture. But the reason or the justification for it is very simple. It's very simple in the sense that this kind of destruction that we have seen will not only affect food security, it would also bring resource-based conflicts, which we are aware of. It also has planetary health implications. What do I mean by planetary health implications? We are suffering the impact of COVID-19. COVID-19 didn't come out of space. COVID-19 came out of activities like this. Now, with pandemics like COVID-19, there is a direct contact between animals and human beings. So moving the virus from the animal to the human being becomes very easy because the biodiversity that would have captured that virus before it gets to the human being has been removed from the way. That is irreversible. Those are the kind of things that activities like that bring. How many more pandemics we're going to have, I do not know. But can it be reduced, the risk be reduced? Yes. If we now take drastic steps to protecting and preserving nature. When that happens, it will put corporations, it will put the states, the countries in check, especially when they are not willing to obey existing laws or even enact new ones, like the ones we just proposed. Let me do my conclusion here. I will read my conclusion just to make the point that I'm not advocating that we should preserve nature's rights and stop development. No, what I'm saying is that we can develop in a sustainable way. And one of the ways to keep that situation is to make sure that we put in proper check those who are willingly destroying nature. This is my conclusion. Conservation is a state of harmony between man and land. If ecosystem management is to take hold and flourish, the relationship between the new goal of preserving the ecological integrity and the standard of providing goods and services for humans must be reconciled. This depends on utilitarians, that's the anthropocentrists, recognizing the folly of relentless consumption, developing without thinking, and environmentalists, you can say ecocentrists, accepting the reality of society's continued growth. What then are we advocating? What is advocated is sustainable development in an environmentally and socially responsible manner, thinking about whether nature can be maintained or not before you go ahead. Through discussion, through redesign, and the actors' negotiation with potentially affected communities. Now this is how I usually always end my presentations. Treat the earth well. It was not given to you by your parents. It was lent to you by your children. We hold it in trust for posterity. Thank you very much for bearing with me and my English and for listening to me. And I hope you have just a bit of understanding of what I've said. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ngozi, for your lecture. It was so interesting. It was so powerful. I had so many questions I would like to make you about this theme. But first of all, I would like to hear my colleague, Professor Heron, that is an authority about the subject. Please,
just one second, Professor Mariana, just to ask Professor to press stop because it's still sharing the slide.
Yes. Yes, thank
you.
Okay.
Now it's okay. Professor Heron Gordilho.
Hi.
Your considerations.
I'd like to give my congratulations to Professor Jonathan, Professor Fernanda, and Professor Adriana, Professor Rogério, and especially Professor Ngozi Unuigbe for the relevant conference and talk about my pleasure in meet you, because we live in Salvador de Bahia. It's the second one most black city in the world, just after Laos and Niger. There are a lot of Niger descendants here in Bahia, so it was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
We have in our university a lot of African students, especially from Cabo Verde and Angola.
Right.
So it will be a pleasure if you can send another students to stay with us. It's a political of our university. I listened to your conference, and by the title, I hope you talk about the international criminal courts, because there are the first case of ecocide that was judged in this tribunal, in this court, was just in a case in Sudan.
Right.
In Darfur, when wells and drinking water facility were poisoned by the Janjaweed, with support from the central government to remove Black Africans from the region. So in this case, the International Criminal Court create this new type of crime as a kind of crime against the humanity. So I published an article for this on this issue at University of Univalley Review, and I'm translating now to English. But you talk about an ethical approach. So I will comment your conference in the same way, in an ethical approach. Is there three kinds of ethical, environmental point of view? The anthropocentrism, that is the most important. It's a tradition that comes from Aristotle, as you have said, Aristotle and Plato, and after by the Roman tradition in the law, and Kant in European philosophy. Let's say that the animals stay in a world to serve the man, as the same that the plants are in the world to serve the animals.
Right.
Mineral to serve the plants. It is a so-called human being chain. So, Greek being chain. Aristotle, Greek being chain theory. It is dominant even in Brazil. We have a very important consideration. If Brazil or Africa is there is Occident, is Western or no? Or is West or Western or East or Western? It's a very important discussion. So you are into this tradition of West tradition. It's the first question that I put you. For the other side, you have the animal law tradition. United States, the Anglo-Saxon culture is very strong, as you have to say, as Professor Peter Sink and Professor Tom Regan at North Carolina. And now European country, they start to recognize that animals are sensitive beings. Portugal, and French, recently German. The animal is a third gene. No good, no think, no legal subject. And we have a third ethical, environmental ethic. That is the biocentrism. And the biocentrism said that not only men and animals are sensitive or sensious, but the plants are sensitive too. So, and not just plants, but all the nature is sensitive. For example, Professor James Lovelock said that the planet Earth is a living being, act as a living being. So recently, I have think about this COVID-19 sick or epidemic or pandemic, this animal pandemic or zoonotic pandemic. And I think that Professor James Lovelock tell that probably it is a self-defense of the nature against the real virus that is the human being.
Right.
And that probably the new virus are coming to control, to control, especially because the forest, as Amazon and other forests around the world, as in Africa too, are being devastated by the man. So is there a lot of very virus that will come to the human society. So probably it is not the first zoonotic pandemic that we will suffer. I would like to say about, express my feeling for all the people that are dying around the world, in Africa, in Europe, and especially in America, in the North, in the South, in Brazil and Mexico, which is the center, nowadays the center of this suffer, this zoonotic pandemic. In Brazil, we are close to the 100,000 people. A lot of people are losing her parents, losing relatives. So it's a very, very sad here in Brazil. I'm working in Bahia on animal law. We have a animal law review, the first animal law review in Latin America. I think that in Brazil too, we are seeing that the Brazilian government do not respect the Amazonic forest. I hope that Brazilian people and the judicial system can reply, can respond to that and stop the deforestation in Amazon forest. In conclusion, I don't know if you research about this subject, but I would like to ask you, because the judgment of the International Criminal Court on the case in Sudan, in Darfur, they talk about the ecocide is the consequence, is just an intentional act against people, not against nature. But it's not, there is no atypicity to ecocide in the Rome Statute. It's just something in Brazil, it's a similar interpretation. It's a kind of interpretation that is very dangerous in criminal law. So people talk about this need an amendment in the Statute of Rome to protect the nature and to respect the nature for itself, not when a crime against people, the poisoning of water, for example. What do you think about that? This case in of Darfur and the situation of protecting not the nature for itself, but the people who live near, who use this environment to survive. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do you want me to make a comment, a quick comment to that?
Yes, you can comment if you want, Professor Ngozi.
Okay, so I'll just
I
make
think
a quick
there is
comment.
a question.
Yeah, sure. Yes, I know that there are other people who have to speak, but I think it's important for me to say that first, starting with this crime of ecocide, I mentioned in one of the slides that I won't be able to go into the details of what this kind of crime should be, because that's another full topic by itself. The nature of the crime, the act itself, what constitutes the crime, how it can be enforced, and all of that. But let it be said, and I really like to emphasize that the reason why the International Criminal Courts took that decision, in my own strong view, is the same reason why you will take a nature case to the regular courts and they will judge the case with the anthropocentric laws. That is still going to be the same unless the mindset changes. It's a mindset thing. Personally, I did not expect the international courts to declare the crime of ecocide as an independent crime against nature. It's not that straightforward. A man or human beings cannot protect what they do not respect. So there's a lot to do with the behavioral change, there's a lot to do with the mindset change and all of that. So it rests with us, with people like us, to begin to do analysis, to begin to do nudges, just like the slave trade and all of that, and make a strong case for why ecocide should be like genocide, like every other international crime. Now, that's for that one. And then whether anthropocentric is Western, well, I won't call it Western. I would say that it's an importation from colonialism, especially for Africa now, speaking for Africa, because traditions like Christianity, Islam, and all of that, to me, those religions do not say that you should treat nature as a subject. I think it's a misunderstanding, because I'm reading through certain other texts, certain other literature by people who have come from this standpoint. And what they have actually said is, you owe nature stewardship, because we're talking about man within nature. But that was interpreted to mean that nature is your resource, treat it as you want. It is debatable, but of course that has affected a lot of our environmental laws, not just in Africa, but in most parts of the world. Then recognizing animals with their own rights and all of that, that is very I mean, it's getting more and more common, especially amongst the animal liberationists. Now, I don't have any problem with that. There are people who respect just animals. There are people who respect other forms of nature. There are people who respect even non-living nature. Why I don't have a problem with animal liberationism, especially with what Germany is doing, is because it is nature all the same. And it is a step in the right direction. I mean, there's a place to start. Nobody is saying that everybody has to agree with the whole idea of protecting rocks and all of that. But if you start from one particular step, I think that it's going to make a lot of difference. So if I got those comments correctly, those are the comments I have. And as I was really itching to talk about the part on Ecocide, that was the part I really wanted to talk about. I really appreciate your comments here on. And I look forward to discussing with you more. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Ngozi. Thank you, Professor Heron. Now I would like to hear Professor Adriana Campos. Professor Adriana?
Yes. Good afternoon to Mariana, Santiago, and thanks for inviting me to this important event. I would like to greet the Professor Ngozi Unuigbe, Heron Gordilho, Rogério Molica, Fernanda Serva, Jonathan Vita, Sinara Lacerda, and the students. And I am Adriana Campos, and I'm currently with a problem with my voice, but nothing serious, I believe. In fact, I am History of Law professor at Federal University of Espírito Santo, near Bahia, Minas Gerais, Rio de Janeiro. There are a lot of African students like Bahia University here, mainly from Angola, Mozambique, Cabo Verde, and others. I had the honor of guiding a student from Guinea-Bissau, and I learned more than him. Well, after listening to the excellent exposure to the Professor Ngozi about the suggesting ecocide concept and the comments from Professor Heron Gordilho, I cannot present any big news, but I can start with history. In 2022, the Rio Conference in 1992, or ECO 92, will celebrate the 30th birthday, the responsibility pact with sustainable development was signed by the world leaders. In the ECO 92, the term sustainable environment has become a political concept. A lot has changed in last 30 years. The world population is, in 2020, 7.8 billion people. With the COVID-19 epidemic, in Latin America and the Caribbean, it is estimated that more than 83 million people are in extreme poverty. Hunger is the main trouble of this situation. At times like this, it is customary to authorize the expansion of supply areas to the detriment of the environment. My first question is, what is the possible intervention of international organization to help people in a situation of hunger and at the same time look after the environment? In the law field, the right to the environment is one of the fundamental human rights in the Brazilian Constitution. I think the Article 2025, I think. This is because, sure, the natural environment is good for the common use of the people and essential to health quality of life. This means that the natural environment and environmental goods are integrated into the legal category of the res communis omnium, and therefore are considered common interest. Professor Ngozi, my second question is, how should we think about the food shortages and the sustainable environment in this context? Another problem is that the Brazilian government is adversary to the sustainable environment. The government is discussing the foreign critical as an attack on national sovereignty, especially the problem with the fires and mining in the Amazon. Today, I notice a certain lack of action by the Brazilian judicial bodies. Another side, the Brazilian agribusiness shows signs of stress due to the government lack of the sensitivity to foreign criticism. My final question is, how can Brazilian judicial bodies be called upon regarding the constitutional rights for the sustainable development? I would like to thank you, Mariana, and the Law College of Marília, once again, for the opportunity to hear from Professor Ngozi and to expose my concerns with such a current and important topic. Thanks for your attention and you for listening to my reflections about this theme. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. Before you go, please, can you repeat your first question? I got question 2 and 3. First, yes.
Yes. My first question was, what is the possible intervention of international organization to help people in a situation of hunger and at the same time look after the environment? And the second?
I got the first and second. I got the second, I got the third.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Those are very, very important questions. Important not because they are responding to a lecture, but they're important because they are practical. They are about life. You know, it's one thing to say this is what theory says, and it's another thing to talk about what's going to happen in practice. Is it something that we can actually practice? Now, for the role of the international organizations, like what I said earlier in response to Hiron, we have a problem with mindset generally. And until we have a mindset that changes to sustainability, until we have a mindset that changes to respecting nature, then things are still going to be a little more the same. Because most of the international organizations still operate from the mindset of anthropocentrism. So if anybody is going to help you with food, they're still going to help you with food by destroying the environment. That is the truth. That I'm going to link also to the second question so I can answer them together. How then do we deal with food security issues? Now, I was in a discussion a few days ago and I told someone that looking around the world, it's difficult to see a country that does not have good environmental laws. The problem with these laws is the enforcement. And that's the same thing with Brazil, it's the same thing with Nigeria, it's the same thing with all of these other countries. It is the enforcement of these laws. When it comes to food laws, we cannot say that if we do not have good food laws, we cannot keep the environment. It is not correct because there are new sustainable ways of producing food. There's something now called sustainable agriculture. You don't even till the soil at all. You don't touch the soil at all. All you need to do is just put fertilizer on the soil and let your crops grow, and mixed cropping. These are things that international organizations can sponsor more. Some of them, I mean, I give them credit, are beginning to do that. But we should encourage them to sponsor sustainable agriculture. The question is, does sustainable agriculture give you the same effects as non-sustainable agriculture? Yes, it does. If you upscale it, it does. So they have to be encouraged, they have to be made to understand that this thing exists and it is possible. We can do both of them side by side. So the idea is that there's a lot of lack of awareness. That is the place to start. A lot of people are not aware about how the environment can be sustained and at the same time, agriculture produce improved. That's one. The justice system is a global problem. Most of the justice systems prefer to give judgment to the oil producing companies to the detriment of the environment, most of them. Now I give you an example of one of them in Nigeria. Nigeria does not have, I mean, our constitution talks about the environment, but it does not say you have a right to a clean environment. But the constitution says The Constitution protects the right to life. So what this particular court did was to say, if you're destroying the environment, I want to interpret it that you're destroying life. That was the judge's own interpretation. That is a brilliant interpretation. That is excellent. The judgment of that case was that the court told the oil company, you know what, look for different ways and come back and tell us how you will stop these activities, because they're actually activities against the lives of the people. Give us 1, 2, 3, 4 steps, how you're going to do it. And they said, come back next week and tell us how you're going to do it. Now, before it was time for the company to come back, the case file got missing and the judge got transferred. That automatically killed that case. If you see what I mean? So it is a general attitude for judges to prefer to protect production than the environment. So the answer to that is same awareness, same orientation, same education that the judges need. It is a general thing, and I personally think that environmental education is something that has been taken for granted. We assume a lot that the government and all these judges, and they know exactly what is happening. Many of them have no idea what climate change is. So if we're going to start with taking pains and making sacrifices, we should move our sacrifices to awareness and environmental education. That's a good place to start, because many people, like I said, don't even know about sustainable agriculture. Yeah, thank you so much.
Perfect. Your thoughts about education, I agree completely. But before doing my questions, Professor Ngozi, I would like to hear Professor Rogério Murica. Please.
Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Mariana for this special invitation, and congratulations, Professor Mariana, Professor Fernanda Serva, our Director Jonathan, Sinara, and Unimar for the success of the internationalization of our program. I'm also very glad to be together with Professors Adriana and Aaron. And finally, I want to congratulate Professor Ngozi for the bright presentation. As our director said, it's very important this opportunity to listen different points of view, mainly listen an African professor. I also congratulations Professor Ngozi on your Portuguese. The translations were perfect. As Professor Adriana said, how the world is looking our difficult to preserve the Amazon forest. Africa, like Brazil, has a marvelous environment, and we have the big difficulty in how to manage economic growth without destroying its nature. As we saw in your picture in the presentation, it's very hard to balance these two values. And here in Brazil, we are starting a tax reform. Professor Jonathan is a specialist in this area. And I want to know your opinion, Professor, if the tax incentives for environment preservation are a good way in order to have economic growth and the preservation environment. And I'm a civil parachute professor, so I'm curious to know, in Africa, if you have a big environment damage, who can represent the nature, the environment in the court? For example, your example in the presentation, you have a mining company who destroys the forest. In Africa, who can go in the judge in order to stop the destruction and ask for a reparation or a indemnity of its damage? I think that's this, because I think that you don't have many time, but I like to thank you very much for your lecture and your disponibility to stay with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rogero. Okay, so I'll start with the first question on tax reform. Tax reform and environmental matters has been a debate for some time. People are, yes, we should have tax reform. People are, no, we should not have tax reform. Now, I want to see it from this point of view. We have the kind of, I'm sure you have in Brazil, where you have criminal laws as well. So you have criminal laws, you penalize some parts of some kind of acts against the environment. And what happens on some of those civil laws, and civil laws as well, if you do this, you pay this particular amount. Now in Nigeria, what we have is that we have some of these penalties that you pay if you do anything wrong with the environment. Some of these laws have very, very tiny penalties. I mean, when I say tiny, I mean really tiny. Some can be less than £5, less than $5. Some can be up to $10. And for goodness sake, we're talking about oil production companies. If I'm an oil production company and I see that your law is telling me to pay $10, I'm going to pay for 10 years and continue to destroy your environment. That's exactly what's going to happen. So if you're going to bring tax and you tell them, you pay this amount of tax if you're going to do this, or we remove this amount of money if we see that you're going to do this, that is a very, very welcome thing, as far as I am concerned. Because it's called tax incentive, right? There are also tax disincentives and all of that. But then, if I'm a company, an oil producing company, and you tell me, okay, if you do not do this, then we will not tax you for this particular activity. I will be motivated to do the right thing, right? Ordinarily, that is what should happen. But that is not 100% guarantee that they will not do it. Because there's already a bad history of penalties. So what I would usually advise under that circumstance is, yes, you can have tax incentives, you can have tax disincentives, but you should also have very, very strong criminal laws in place. So these tax reforms and the criminal laws work together. So when they have failed at one level, you can task them on another level, for instance, the criminal aspect. But if you leave it only at the tax level, I tell you, the same problem you have with the enforcement of laws is going to catch up with us eventually. So yes, tax reforms are good, but they should be in combination with other kind of reforms. That's the first one. Now, the second one is on environmental damage. If you check the Nigerian story, you discover that it's a very, very, very painful situation of environmental degradation in Nigeria. especially the Niger Delta area of Nigeria, where you have large biodiversity, or rather where you are supposed to have large biodiversity. There's been so much destruction. I mean, I'll find the time to send the pictures, but there's terrible destruction. And when I say destruction, I mean destruction that cannot be reversed. This is the oil polluting the soil, the farms, and everything. That's on one side. But even right now, as we speak, you know gas flaring, right? Gas flaring, the fire that goes on at the gas plants, good. Now, there's gas flaring going on as we speak. And that gas flaring has been on that way since 1956. Nobody knows for how long it's going to go on. So you can imagine the health conditions, the atmosphere, and everything about biodiversity in that kind of area. It is a very, very, very bad situation. We have environmental laws that on their face, they look like good laws, but the enforcement is very bad. So there has to be a paradigm shift. That's the opinion. Yes, it's a very bad case of degradation in Nigeria. Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ngozi, and thank you, Professor Rogério, for your questions. And now my turn.
Yes.
I think, Professor Ngozi, it was excellent that you made a different, that you put a difference between biocentric view and ecocentric view, because it's not so clear in Brazil yet.
Yeah.
And for me, I agree, it's totally different. And I am concerned with the ecocide, because sometimes I think it's a kind of anthropocentric perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a crime against humanity. And I think it's not so powerful, like thinking about nature as subject of rights. And it's possible, I'm thinking about if it's possible to conciliate the both points of view. And I don't know if you have talked about it, but I would like to hear you. And another point is sometimes, and I'm working with sustainable development for a long time. And sometimes I think that this discourse seems like a little distorted, a kind of greenwashing. And I'm very upset about it. And for me, it's clear that we need changes in economy. So I'm not sure if it's possible by the way of sustainable development. And so I would like to hear what you think about alternatives like the growth. I don't know if you have heard about it. That's my points.
Okay, thank you. I totally agree with you. Usually when I'm talking about biocentrism and ecocentrism, I don't dwell too much on biocentrism. It's a point of view and I choose to respect it for what it is. But I personally want to feel that if it's something you want to work with, if it's something that you want to be practicable, then it's better to look at it from something that people will understand. So I won't say give the earthworm its intrinsic value or give the ant its intrinsic value or things like that. I'll just want to say preserve nature for what nature is, whatever you interpret nature to be. So that conflict of terminologies and theories, I try to avoid it most of the time. That is why, after discussing all those theories, I came to the conclusion to say that the most comfortable way to look at the preservation of nature is that man is within nature. To look at it from a community perspective. If you look at it from a community perspective, then ecocide would have a new meaning to you. It will have a new meaning in the sense that Man is part of a biological community. He's not separate from it. He's in nature and nature is in him. So if there is a destruction to nature, it is not just a destruction to nature, it is a destruction to man. It is both of them that are being destroyed. So you cannot separate them. That's what it means. So that is where I choose to look at Ecocide from. If I look at Ecocide from the point of view as instrumental to man, that is anthropocentric. But I look at Ecocide as a destruction to a community that I am part of. That is different, is a different outlook. Now, talking about sustainable development, usually when I'm in a conference and the theme is sustainable development, the first comment I make about sustainable development is that sustainable development is adapting material growth to the Earth's carrying capacity. Once you are doing it in such a way that the Earth can no longer carry it, it is no longer sustainable development. Now, it is a terminology that has been abused. It is a terminology that has been overused. It is a terminology that has been misunderstood. Left for me, I think is the most misunderstood terminology concept of environmental law. And it is the most annoyingly used because a lot of people do not understand what it is. As far as I'm concerned, sustainable development means that whatever you do, let nature be your standard. If you are going to do an irreversible damage to nature, then do not do it. That, in my opinion, is sustainable development. The reason why sustainable development is looked at the way it is looked at today is because a lot of people, no matter what they say, still have an anthropocentric mind view. When you listen to them, when you look at the writings, when you engage in conversations with them, you can tell when a man does not have respect for nature. So of course, I mean, I can only talk to the extent that I am convinced. If I'm convinced that nature should not be preserved, then I'm going to talk from that perspective. So I want to excuse it that anybody who talks about sustainable development the way they talk about sustainable development, they do not understand it, actually.
Okay, Professor, thank you very much. And finally, I would like to hear Professor Jonathan Vita. Jonathan, do you have any questions
yes,
or comments?
Actually, thank you. Actually, I'm thinking about what Professor Rogério Mollica said, and actually, I'm wondering if, because we can have a market solution to the problem of environment, we can have also state solution, and the state solution can come in two different ways. It can come from positive and negative incentives. They can be taxation, it can be regulation, it can be many things. So which of those, at least I quoted 3 different forms. So the market solution is people are not willing to buy things that are related to the problems with the environment. Then we have the state solution, which can be subdivided in positive and negative incentives. So which of, can you comment on the 3 forms and its efficacy, if possible?
I'll just start with my response to that particular question a while ago. The one for tax reforms, in my own personal opinion, looking at it from the context of Nigeria, I think it will be effective, but that's the incentives, disincentives. It's going to be effective in combination with other factors. But trust me, the market-based solution is not going to go anywhere. I'll tell you why. if you tell anybody that this particular good is produced by somebody who doesn't protect the environment, and that good is cheaper than anything else is going to buy, he's not going to listen to you. He's not going to listen to you. Let it kill him instead, but he'll buy something that's cheaper. Left for me, I think that's a human nature. I would buy something that's cheaper, maybe. But when I see that, yes, but when I see that it's going to, when I have this, I look at it from a point of knowledge. I have to make an informed decision. Of course, I might choose differently. But if we're going to rely on that market mechanism, market-based mechanism, it's not going to work in this kind of environment. That's one. And the second reason why it might not work is because a lot of people are wondering, what is it with the environment? What are you talking about? We take it for granted that people actually have environmental awareness. I mean, the average man really doesn't. He doesn't, yeah. So you just feel like
the second part, and the second part, so do you think that positive or negative incentives are more appropriate on the state-based proposal? Do you think that positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement?
The positive reinforcement will work. The positive reinforcement will work because they have tried negative, and the negative hasn't done much, really. Yeah, so if you're going to promise this and promise that, it might not have, I mean, an overt effect, but it's going to be effective to a significant extent. Let me be very honest, yes.
Oh, that's interesting to know, because here actually in Brazil, Professor Rogério talked about the tax reform and all of that. Here, we actually, some people sell that we have a green VAT, but it's not true because it's a form of redistribution only of the VAT within the cities and the state. But we don't have clear tax incentives over these activities. Actually, I made a lecture on the International Fiscal Association, which is a big association of tax lawyers. And there I talked about precisely that, meaning that we don't have tax incentives towards green and efficient energy. We don't have relating to many different aspects of that. And in the end, the poverty is a really thing that plays out in this decision.
Yes,
for example, here in Brazil, the energetic chart is comprised, probably, if I'm not mistaken, 20% of the people still use wood as a source of energy.
Yes, here too.
So this is really a problem, because we're talking about, okay, let's allow cars without, polluting cars, such as electric cars or something like that. Okay, that's great, but how much?
But there's a bigger one, exactly.
Yeah. No, but thank you very much, and I'm really glad that you also look at that from an economic perspective, because it's really important. In the end, without economics and without economic positive or negative reinforcement, we don't have many chance to address it. Because
correct.
Only going to the repressive side or the criminal side, I don't know if it will work at all.
Yeah, that's correct. The students don't have any questions.
Thank you, Professor Ngozi, for your patience and for answering every question that we talk to you. And Professor Jonathan comments are always so interesting. And I agree that the question sometimes is so simple. We need all of us to have a change of lifestyle, and not only think about what companies could do, but everyone personally changing the lifestyle, we can reach another situation. And so I would like to ask you your final words to my students to inspire them to still fighting for nature and still studying about this subject, please, if you don't mind.
Oh, yes, please. By all means, it always gives me pleasure to tell anyone who cares to listen that every little counts, actually. Every little activity, every little step taken to protect nature counts. Don't see anything as a waste. For instance, if you hold, it's all right. If you hold a bottle of water or a piece of paper and you want to throw it on the floor, just think of the fact that, oh no, it can be recycled or the environment is going to be destroyed by it. Take the pains, take the sacrifice. Let the sacrifice be for your children and your grandchildren, whatever you want to look at it. But get a reason to motivate yourself. It might not be everybody's reason, but get a reason to motivate yourself that every little for the protection of nature counts. Every little. If it's wearing your clothes more than twice, or rather more than once, it is okay. If it's not using too much water, that's a reason. If it's not using too much electricity, that's a reason. So if you do not know much about it, it's good to read, it's good to chat. For me, for example, I'm open to chatting, to any kind of question, especially on nature, as simple as it may be. The simple things in life are the things that should make us protect nature. It's not complicated, it doesn't have to be up there. It's not the responsibility of states to protect nature. It is my responsibility, it is your responsibility in our little things that we do every day to protect nature.
Thank you, Professor, for your beautiful words. And I think it's the end of our event. And I hope someday you can come to Brazil, come to our university. It will be a pleasure for us to have you personally. We're still in touch, and congratulations for your excellent job.
Thank you.
Be safe in your country. I have a special relation to Nigeria because I'm from Bahia, I told you before. Yeah. And so this contact, it's very important to me. Let's stay in touch. Yes, now, let's talk a little Portuguese to say goodbye to my students. Pessoal, em português, agora, obrigada pela presença de todos vocês. Estamos de férias, mas vocês estão aí, curiosos pelo tema, curiosos pela internacionalização. Isso nos motiva a fazer um evento melhor a cada semana. E, desde já, vocês estão convidados. Na próxima quarta-feira, nós vamos ter um evento muito especial, voltado para o direito administrativo. E aí o convidado mexicano é um convidado especial, mas os debatedores são grandes nomes do direito administrativo brasileiro. Está imperdível, feito com muito amor para vocês. Então, eu já vou me despedindo e eu espero vocês na semana que vem. Muito obrigada, um abraço a todos.
Tchau, tchau, pessoal. Até amanhã à noite. Não esqueça. Amanhã às 5 da tarde.